Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who has come in here to this forum. First of all, I want to thank the UN guest for making this happen, to bring me back the second time to Iceland, and also the team at the Center for Peace for having me here, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Harriet, and I come from Uganda. I'm the Executive Director of a community-based organization known as Foundation for Integrated Development, and we support survivors of conflict-related sexual gender-based violence. Myself, I am a survivor of this conflict, and I'm glad to say that I bring the voice of the survivors in this space. Uganda has experienced conflict for the last 20 years, and we experienced over 125 related conflicts, of which most of these were, the 44 were part of the armed conflicts that were experienced in nature. And this war literally caused a lot of harm to both women, men, boys, and girls. And these are the people that we support in northern Uganda. We're established since 2005, supporting women and girls in the internally displaced camps of the women that were mostly sexually abused. As an organization, we've conducted over 3,000 screenings for the persons who were sexually abused. But of course, this is like half of the population where we operate. Uganda has a population of over 40 million. So you can imagine just a dot of the tip to do the work that we're doing, strictly because of the lack of funding, which is a big challenge in my country. We use a couple of things to do the screenings of these survivors, but also we have challenges in disclosure, where you find most of the men, especially who are sexually abused, tend not to come out to speak about it. But even the women themselves, it's not something that you just stand there and tell people that, yes, I was sexually abused. So disclosure is one of the challenges that we have to address the war-related injuries that the women, men, boys, and girls experienced. So we conduct a couple of activities. For me, I come from the background of grassroots. So I'm bringing for you the grassroots approach of mediation, of peace building. As a peace builder, I'm a community activist and a peace builder, and so I empower women to do peace building activities from the grassroots, because for us we lost hope with the international space. I mean, policies are done up there, we're not even there, and it takes forever for these policies to be trickled down to the space where we are. So what have we done? For us as an organization, we're taking up this to do our peace building within our space, by ourselves, from the grassroots. Where else to do it from, but where it's happening from? Because nobody's going to come from New York to come to Uganda, in a very tiny village where I come from, to help me and my people to create peace in my community. We have now a lot of refugees that are influxing the communities. Who is going to do that? Apart from us, the people who live it, who are actually doing the work at the ground to make sure we have peace in the community where we live. So we conduct a couple of activities, community-led dialogues. We have transitional justice, advocacy, and dialogues with the cultural leaders and different persons that we work with. But above all, we do a lot of economic empowerment for the survivors, because we know once these women are empowered, then that's one way of women bringing back peace into the community. Right now, as we look at Uganda, yes, the conflict ended, but again more issues are raising up. Issues of land. We have a lot of land conflicts. Just because the guns are silent, it doesn't mean there is no conflict. Just like the previous speaker shared her story of trafficking, it does not mean that once you've been settled, everything is perfect. No. The issues of trauma, the issues of health, who does that apart from us to take responsibility? Because peace is a process, and peace is holistic. It's not one day and then you say, okay, fine, we have the agreements, peace has been restored. No, it takes forever. I just want us to think back about the conflict violence. When you look at SGBV, which is conflict-related, most of it has been pushed into the gender-based violence context, and it is related mostly to the women. But for me, as an activist, I want us to change that narrative because it is a learning for us. Before, as an organization, we started working with only women and girls. Along the way, we noticed there are men and boys who have been sexually abused, and nobody's telling their story as well. So how can we have peace if we're saying the men are okay? Not all men are okay. There are men who have been sexually abused. How do we bring the women who have been sexually abused and the men who have been sexually abused to the table? Because they know what they've gone through, and they're only ones who can help us bring peace into the community. Somebody who has never experienced violence will never sit there and bring a policy and amend it. No, it hasn't happened to him. But if I have gone through it and I know I don't want to see anyone else go through it, I think I'm at a better place to actually bring change, because I know I don't want to see that happen again in a community that I believe in. So Uganda as a country, we have signed a couple of peace agreements. We have the Beyond Juba Peace Agreement, which we had about 2 or 3 women who are participating in the negotiation peace process. One of them is Her Excellency Honorable Betty Bigombe. I don't know if you've heard about her, but she's one of our peace advocates and representing women from the context of Uganda. We also have the grassroots, who are not actually recognized, by the way. They did a great job in this peace process, but you cannot hear about them unless you're at the grassroots. So where are they? Why don't we bring them to the table? And yet, because we know they are key persons and they're people who can bring actually change. Because they've lived, they've seen, they've been there with the LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army, which pushed a lot of the conflict in Uganda with the UPDF, which is our army. We also have the Transitional Justice Policy, which has been approved by the African Union. And Uganda as well has also brought up this transitional justice policy. But the question is, how many women at this table? There were very few women who participated in the development of these policies, and they are the ones who are supposed to be taking lead. But as I talk of now, that's a big challenge. So where are the women at the table? Is it the woman from the Western world, or is it the woman who has been affected at the grassroots? So when we talk about peace, what do we mean? Is it the absence of war, the gun? What do we mean by peace? Is it because we have infrastructure and we say peace has already been restored? No. For me as an activist, I know there's a lot to do with peace building. It's not just when we have a structure built, and that's one of the issues we have with the donor world. Once the donor world sees there's no more gun, they go away. They forget there's a lot to be done. If you've left a community fighting for resources, just because there's no gun, you think you've restored that peace? That is what we're going through right now. Even now we're struggling with climate change. We're destroying our own environment in the name of looking for economic empowerment. And we think the peace was restored, but before we know it, we shall be actually we are sitting on a time bomb. And even this, I bring it back to Iceland as well. You see what is happening with your climate. Before you know it, a lot will be happening. I'm not prophesying doom, but I'm just giving us an insight to think about what peace has. We have to look at peace in a more holistic way. There are so many things that we need to address to ensure that we achieve the UNHCR 1325 agenda. So peace building and transitional justice debates need to be looked at a more holistic approach if we're to bring peace into the communities where we come from. As an organization, we think we need to embrace very inclusive approaches. A lot has been talked about it in the morning. How do we bring out modeling approaches to ensure that women are part of the peace building process? We have to come back to the grassroots, identify those peace builders at the grassroots, and bring them back to the table, because they come with experience. They come with experience. They come with knowledge. They know what they've gone through. So if we bring them and put them on this table, definitely they will contribute a lot in developing policies that are not just on paper, but policies that are actually relative to what we're going through, policies that can actually bring change. We need to build the female mediators' capacity, give them spaces to embrace their agency, because we know these people, even if they're from the grassroots, they can be given the opportunity to practice and have their agency and voices heard. When you look at the aspect even from the UN, I think from the 1990 to 2017, we still have only 2% mediators in that space, and about 8% of the negotiators. So that shows there is still a lot to be done. And a lot to be done means we need to create those opportunities where the women are given space to have a conversation, but also be able to implement, decide, and take part in these key spaces. What else do we think we can do to ensure that women are part of this process? Funding, I think, is a big issue for the women's grassroots mediators. And I think if we can support those networks and the peace builders networks, we have the UN Women Fund. I don't know what happened to the UN Women Fund, if we have representatives here. I think the time the fund was being established, it was supposed to support the women-led organizations. But I think there's also a big challenge there. You find there's a lot of fight for funding. Sometimes now we hear they're funding the male-led organizations. And then funding also stops at the national level. So what happens to the grassroots? There is no linkage to build that bridge. And remember, if you're bringing the women at the grassroots, they must have their representative. The indigenous communities, these people have representatives. So we need to bring them on the table and ensure that there is that space for them to be part of these processes. We also have to strengthen the linkage between the global, national, and the grassroots peace builders networks if we're to have a strong network of women advocating for peace at that level. Language has been talked about, so I will not say much. But I want to just emphasize that language is key in peace agreements, especially to ensure that we have gender inclusion in the peace-building phase. So, like she shared with us, language is key. How do we share and say men are perpetrators, women are the survivors? How do we break that binary? How do we come out of it and know that, yes, we are not homogeneous? We are not homogeneous. So how do we bring everybody to the table where we participate in designing these policies? We take part in decision-making, how and which policies should be designed. If we have the pseudo, we used to have funding to implement these, the pseudo, the UN 1325. This was all done by the UN Women Fund. But we don't have that. So how are we going to engage in these spaces if there is no money to support the women into taking part in the mediation processes? Transitional justice and peace building. How do we challenge the outside syndrome and offer a more holistic view of peace building where local women or local grassroots peace builders are key players? We have this saying that peace building has been put to the persons in the Western world. If you go to the UN, I've been to the UN headquarters, both in Geneva and New York, and you find the whole house, I'm sorry to say, is full of white people. Do they even know what happened in the village in northern Uganda? Do they know what happened in the village of South Sudan, apart from people who have worked in South Sudan? They have no idea. But they are the people sitting there making policy. And there is no person here who has actually lived the experience to tell them, come on, look here, you're talking about climate change, you're talking about addressing the issues that the Konyi, the leader, did to the people of my community. If I showed you photos here, it would be a very different story. And you see what actually happened to the people in my community. They have no idea, but I can tell what actually happened. And how do I help my people, the neighbors within the community, to have peace and address issues of boundary conflict? What have we learned as an organization? We've learned that peace building goes beyond the absence of the grant and infrastructure development, global policy making at that level. We've also learned that issues related to bring peace, issues related to healthcare, political, cultural, legal, economic, and psychosocial support all need to go hand in hand to have a peaceful community. And it's not just from that space, but we have to break that bridge of the bottom-up approach. We've also learned that financial support for women-led peace builders and mediators networks is key to have comprehensive healing and peace in our communities. As an organization, we've also learned that survivor-led groups need therapeutic environments and create safe spaces where we give voices for the grassroots reconciliators and peace builders to have their own space to talk about issues that affect them, but also have people that support them to have peace in their own spaces. We've also learned that proactive action from various grassroots, both at the national, global, international level, are paramount in achieving the UN 1325 and 2242 agenda, without which, even if you do a lot of advocacy up here and there's not much being done at the grassroots, we may miss the point of building peace in our community. Lastly, we also ask that proactive engaging and listening to survivors' voices, all survivors. It doesn't matter a woman or a girl, but the men, the boys, the LGBTQI, all this is imperative in having meaningful peace-building processes and negotiations in our country. Lastly, I say, there is nothing about us without us. You're busy talking about us and peace building, but you're not bringing us on this table. We shall not reach anywhere if we are having a conversation at the global level and leaving those that have actually lived these experiences and not bringing them on the space. For us, we use music and drama to bring peace to ourselves. I don't know what you do, but for us, that helps us as peace builders. Ambition is required for us to bring peace, but it's only possible because it requires women, men, girls, rigor, and participation in the peace-making process. Thank you very much.